the CR of this batch, third year MBBS? Who is the CR? Class representative. Can you please come online? CR. Hello, CR. Sai Malik. Are you
Sir, good
the
morning,
CR?
sir.
Are
Sir,
you the
good
CR?
morning, sir.
No, are you the CR?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Sai Malik, right? Okay,
Yes,
am I
sir.
audible? Sai Malik, am I
Yes, sir.
audible?
You are audible. Yes, sir.
Okay. Shall I start the class?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think this topic has not been covered, right? Covered yet, right? Salivary glands.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Not covered.
Not covered in surgery, right? Okay. I will finish off this topic today. So, okay. What are salivary glands? There are three major salivary glands. One is parotid, one is submandibular, and sublingual. So, besides these, there are also some small salivary glands, that is anterior lingual glands, and some other glands in relation to lip, cheek, and roof of mouth is present. So, there are also some small labial, buccal, and palatal glands will be seen. So, what is parotid anatomy? So, it is the largest salivary gland and lies below the external cord stigmatus between mandible and the sternocleidomastoid muscle. And most of the glands overlies the facial nerve. That means this facial nerve divides the parotid gland into deep and superficial lobes. And this parotid is covered by a investing layer of cervical fascia. Actually, the cervical fascia is a layer of deep fascia. So there are three layers of deep fascia. In that, one layer is investing layer. So that investing layer covers the parotid gland, and within this fascia lies several lymph nodes. So enlargement of these lymph nodes may mimic parotid tumors. So parotid gland, because it secretes some juice, some mucus-like thing, so it has to come out into the mouth. So it has parotid duct, that are also called as parotid duct of Stenson, which is 2 centimeters, 2 inches long, and arises from anterior part of the gland and passes forward across the masseter muscle to pierce the buccinator muscle and open on the mucous membrane of the cheek opposite the second upper molar tooth. So this is here you can see this is facial nerve branches. There are 5 branches: temporal, zygomatic, buccal, marginal, and cervical branch. So on this, in this region, you will have parotid gland, and this facial nerve divides parotid into superficial and deep glands, deep lobes. So classification, how they are classified? They are classified into these types. One is acute suppurative sialadenitis, chronic suppurative adenitis. These are inflammatory conditions of the salivary glands. Sjogren's syndrome, granulomatous disease, viral infections, coelolithiasis. Always remember, lithiasis means stone. Coelo means gland, salivary gland. Coelolithiasis, that means stone in the duct, that is parotid duct. Trauma is one more cause which causes inflammation of parotid duct. So, what is acute sialadenitis? It occurs. It's nothing but in sialadenitis. There are types. That is, acute parotiditis is the most common, which occurs in setting of poor oral dental hygiene, gross dental caries, immunosuppression, and also in children, acute parotiditis occurs due to mumps. If you can remember in your SPM, they have a topic called mumps. So where bilateral enlargement of the parotid gland is seen. So the children will have both side cheek swelling on both sides. So and it is a viral infection. Mumps is a viral infection caused by paramyxovirus. So what are the clinical features? The patient presents with fever, pain, and swelling. There may be trismus, that is inability to open the jaw, and otalgia. Otalgia is nothing but pain in the ear. And the gland and surrounding area are swollen, warm, tender, and red. Swelling is tense in case of parotid involvement and is confined within the parotid fascia. So intraoral examination will leave inflamed orifice of Stenson duct. If you see intraorally, you can see Stenson duct, where it opens near the upper molar. So in that region, if you see the Stenson duct opening, it will be inflamed. That means it will be reddened. You can see red color thing, and sometimes pus can be coming out through that duct, through that orifice. Okay. Whereas in mumps, high grade fever and pyruvate swellings may be followed by acute orchitis. Orchitis is nothing but inflammation of testis. Inflammation of testis is called orchitis. So, in suppurative pyruvatitis, that is means suppurative means pus. Always remember there is a suppurative means pus forming entity is called pyruvatitis. So, in that the patient is toxic, and the tense pyruvate swelling may evolve into abscess. So, management. How do you management? Hospitalize the patient. Take the radiograph, that is intraoral radiograph, to detect the stone. Then treat vigorously. That means you have to give antibiotics, IV fluids, and if the patient is having any abscess formation, you can know it by clinical examination. Then you have to go for incision and drainage by giving under general anesthesia. So there is one more term. Chronic sinusitis. It is nothing but a recurrent or uh, uh, recurrent or chronic, other name for chronic sinusitis is recurrent sinusitis, and it is due to obstruction of duct of gland due to calculi or stricture of parotid duct. So stricture, why stricture occurs in parotid duct means trauma. Generally, trauma of the parotid duct causes stricture. So there are recurrent episodes of acute infection, and that generally subside with antibiotics. So if there is any swelling, you have to remove the entire swelling. So this is a cyanogram which demonstrates narrowing and silictasia of smaller ducts of gland. So where it is, it's not very clear. So treatment for chronic sinusitis, same, generally conservative with silogox and massage, or also antibiotics will help. If symptoms persist, you have to remove entire superficial parotidectomy. That means you have to remove entire superficial parotid gland. So silolithiasis is nothing but stone in the ducts of major or minor salivary gland. So they are more common in submandibular gland than parotid, whereas parotiditis is more common. That is inflammation of parotid gland. Inflammation of parotid gland is more common than inflammation of submandibular gland, whereas stone is more common in submandibular gland than parotid gland, parotid duct. Okay. Secretions. Why secretions of the submandibular gland are alkaline and contain higher concentration of calcium and phosphate. So it also contains more mucus. Moreover, Wharton's duct is a duct of submandibular gland, whereas Stenson duct is a name given to the duct of parotid. Stenson's is the name given to the duct of parotid, whereas Wharton's is a name given to the duct of submandibular gland. And Wharton duct is longer and runs an upward course in its terminal portion. So because of this against gravity course, the chances of accumulation of mucus and calcium and phosphate is more for Wharton's duct, that is submandibular duct. So obviously stone formation is more in submandibular duct than in parotid duct. So this is submandibular calculus in the submandibular duct. Here you can see calculi always appears hyperdense on X-rays. Calculi, any stone, you can see hyperdense, that is white in color. Any calculi will be white in color in X-rays. So this is one more submandibular gland. You can see, and this Wharton ducts open at the frenulum, just side on the right side of the frenulum, right side or on the left side of the frenulum. It opens this duct here. So this is calculi. Clinical features, generally pain and swelling of submandibular gland after meals, especially sore or bitter food are seen. Calculi may be palpable, as you can see in the previous picture. The calculi is it is visible on inspection. So on bidigital examination, you can palpate the calculi in the floor of the mouth. Radiology, obviously you can see stone which is radio opaque. Treatment, calculi in the distal and mid third of duct can be removed by intraoral approach by directly incisioning the duct over the stone. This can be done under local or topical anesthesia, whereas calculi in the proximal part should be treated under general anesthesia via nasal intubation. So resection of the submandibular gland may be required for recurrent calculi or calculi within the gland. So if the calculi is within the duct, you have to remove the calculi by using techniques as I have already told you. Whereas if the calculi is within the submandibular gland, you have to go for submandibular gland resection. You have to remove entire submandibular gland. So there is one important inflammatory disease, that is Mikulicz disease, which is defined as a benign lymphoepithelial process characterized by atrophy of the acini of the parotid gland with lymphocytic infiltration and follicular formation. It is an autoimmune disorder, and here epithelial and myoepithelial cells are seen in lymphocytic aggregates. So what is this Mikulicz? Is nothing but autoimmune disorder with the infiltration of lymphocytes within the epithelial and myoepithelial cells of salivary gland. So what happens in here? There will be a swelling, which is painless, and also there is a dryness of mouth owing to the acinar atrophy, because there is no cells, because the cells have been damaged by autoimmune process. So obviously there will be no mucus secretion. Finally, that leads to dryness of the mouth. These changes may also occur as a part of Sjogren syndrome, where xerophthalmia occurs in addition to dryness of mouth, that is xerostomia. So Sjogren syndrome is nothing but xerophthalmia means dryness of the lacrimal glands. That means dryness of the eyes. So atrophy of the lacrimal glands, whereas xerostomia is dryness of the mouth. So diagnosis is confirmed by FNAC or biopsy. Treatment, symptomatic treatment is required for xerostomia or xerophthalmia. So this is acute parotiditis. Here you can see on the left side, there is a swelling, which is a diffuse swelling, okay, on one side. Generally, if the swelling was seen on the both sides, then it will be a viral infection or mumps. But in general, you won't see bilateral parotid gland swelling. In some cases of alcoholic persons, in chronic cases of alcoholics, you can also see bilateral swellings, parotid swellings in alcoholics. This is intraocular acute left bacterial parotiditis. This picture is not very clearly seen. So intraoral view revealing pus excluding for parotid papilla. So, and this is a parotid swelling. Parotid swelling will the difference between any parotid swelling and any other lymph nodes or sebaceous cyst is parotid swelling will move the ear lobule up. It will displace the ear lobule. Generally, for a clinical examination point of view, you have to remember if you are dealing with parotid swelling, that will move the ear lobule upwards, whereas other swellings doesn't move. And also there is one more sign called curtain sign. So if you try to move this parotid swelling above the zygomatic arch, you may not be able to move this parotid swelling above the zygomatic arch. So that is called curtain sign. Whereas any other swelling, if it is not parotid, if it is some lymph nodes, you can move the swelling above the zygomatic arch, because this is enclosed in a layer called cervical fascia. That is investing layer of cervical fascia, it's enclosed. So that is attached to zygomatic arch. That cervical fascia is attached to zygomatic arch. So if you try to move this above zygomatic arch, it won't move. It will just move upwards till the zygomatic arch. So that is curtain sign. Curtain, just like a curtain, how we move just above to some limit. In the same way, parotid swelling also doesn't move above the zygomatic arch. That is called curtain sign. So this is cirrhosis of the parotid gland secondary to excess alcohol intake. As I already told you, chronic alcoholics, cirrhosis of the parotid gland occur. So the patient will look like this. He will have bilateral parotid swellings. And this is pleomorphic adenoma of right parotid. That is a benign tumor of parotid gland. So this is the swelling, and this is moving. It's pushing the ear lobule upwards. And this is large pleomorphic adenoma of left parotid gland. You can see. So submandibular gland is a mixed serous and mucus. It consists of large superficial and small deep lobe that connects each other around the posterior border of mylohyoid muscle. That means mylohyoid muscle divides submandibular gland into superficial and deep, whereas facial nerve divides parotid gland into superficial and deep. So, as already told, submandibular duct, that is Batten ducts, which forms the deep part of the gland, runs forward beneath the mucosa of the floor of the mouth along the side of the tongue to open immediately at the side of the frenulum of the tongue. Its orifice is readily visible and saliva can be seen trickling for it. And this gland can be palpated bidigitally. So sublingual glands, these are very small glands which is present in the floor of the mouth and just immediately in front of the deep part of the salivary glands. And the importance of this gland is not very important because it has very small role in secretions of salivary glands. So it doesn't play a very important role. So enlarged salivary glands, what is the what do you say? Classification, very important classification. If benign, you will have this. Benign tumors are classified like this: pleomorphic adenoma, monomorphic adenoma, Watkins, hemangioma, lipoma, cyst, abscess, mumps, and Mikulicz. Malignant, if arising from the gland, adenoid cystic carcinoma, adenocarcinoma, and acinar cell carcinoma. Arising from the duct, squamous cell carcinoma, mucoepidermoid carcinoma. Unclassified, which are not classified, anaplastic carcinoma, and arising in pleomorphic tumor. So again, salivary gland tumor, parotid, most common, that is 80%, submandibular 15%, minor, that is lingual, lip, cheek, palate, 5%. Again, in parotid, in among 80%, they are again 80% are. This is a rule of 80. We can call it as a rule of 80. 80% is benign and 20% malignant. Among 80% benign, 80% is pleomorphic adenoma and 20% is monomorphic adenoma. Whereas in submandibular gland, 50% benign, 50% malignant. Whereas in minor, 40% benign, 60% malignant. Because there is also one rule, like if the size of the gland increases, chances of malignancy will be less. If the size of the gland decreases, the chances of malignancy will be more. So this is a rule in salivary glands. So among all these three glands, that is parotid, submandibular, and salivary, that is lingual, sublingual is the smallest in size. So obviously it will be having more chances of malignancy. Whereas parotid is largest, so it is having least malignant, more of benign conditions. Whereas submandibular, it is in between parotid and minor, so it will be 50-50, 50% malignant, 50% benign. So this is ranula affecting the floor of mouth. That is another topic, ranula. So here you can see enlargement of right submandibular cervical gland due to calculus disease. So here you can see this is a jaw and this is submandibular gland. And attacks of pain and swelling were precipitated by meals. And this is mucus ridden cyst, which is caused by blockage of submandibular duct by any trauma or something, any mucus secretions. So this is mucus ridden cyst. Generally, we see these cases a lot this type of cases in our OP. So a translucent swelling on the lip is typical. So here you can see a translucent swelling, and it arises from sublingual glands. Just remember. So salivary gland tumors, it is classified according to WHO. So this is the classification of salivary gland, which is a long question also. Very important question. You have to for the exams. This is very important. So among this benign, malignant, benign is adenoma, pleomorphic adenoma, and monomorphic, and papillary cystadenoma and lymphomatosa, that is Watkins tumor, also called as. Whereas in malignant, low-grade malignant, which includes mucoepidermoid tumor and actinic cell tumor. High-grade malignant, which includes adenoid cystic, malignant mixed tumor, adenocarcinoma, and finally undifferentiated carcinoma. So first is pleomorphic adenoma, also called as mixed tumor, because it consists of both epithelial and mesodermal remnants. And this pleomorphic adenoma, they have asked a lot of times as a question for you. Just remember, as a foremost question, they have been asked regularly. They have been asking this question regularly. Pleomorphic adenoma. Just at least read it in your books if you not able to hear. So it comprises 60% of all salivary glands and constitutes 90% of all benign tumors in the parotid gland. Most common in lower part of parotid gland. If you see a parotid gland, which is if the parotid gland swelling, most of the times it will be pleomorphic adenoma. So monomorphic, compared to pleomorphic adenoma, monomorphic is an uncommon benign tumor of salivary gland. After pleomorphic adenoma, next comes is Watkins tumor in incidence. In number of cases, Watkins tumor, which is also called as papillary cystadenoma lymphomatosa, and it is more common in males. Most commonly occurs in the tail of parotid, usually in the older men, and also one of the typical feature of Watkins is commonly seen in smokers. Whereas pleomorphic adenoma, you won't see generally in smokers, whereas Watkins, it is very typically seen in smokers. And here that these tumors are soft and cystic. It can also occur in lymph nodes, superior and medial to the gland. about 10% of cases of bilateral presentation. Pleomorphic adenoma also can have bilateral presentation. That means it can occur in both sides. The histological features of Watkins indicate that it arises from remnants of parotid tissue trapped in lymph nodes within the parotid gland. So malignant transformation is rare. And the third type is oncocytoma, which is also called oxyphil cell adenoma, which is rare tumor. Just you have to remember only two types of tumors, benign tumors, that classification, and the tumor. First tumor is pleomorphic adenoma, and second tumor is Watkins tumor. And this is oxyphil oncocytoma, that is oxyphil cell adenoma, which is very rare, and it also rarely undergoes malignant change. So next is malignant tumors. So first is adenoid cystic carcinoma, which consists of pods of darkly staining cells with cystic spaces containing mucin. It has a propensity to spread along nerves and Haversian canals of bones with little bone erosion. Thus, widespread local involvement is common in this, and it also spreads by blood split. It also spreads by blood. Next is mucoepiderma. These are all malignant tumors. It is the most common parotid salivary gland malignancy. Acinic, which is a low-grade tumor, generally bilateral, and they are most often seen in parotid and are more common in human. Acinic cell tumor, most commonly seen in parotid. Generally, malignancies most commonly seen in other tumors like other glands like submandibular and sublingual, but acinic is most commonly seen in parotid gland. And one more type is adenocarcinoma, which has both peri and intraneural invasion. So next is malignant mixed tumor. There is carcinoma X pleomorphic adenoma. That means the pleomorphic adenoma will become malignant in after few days. There is a chance, that is very small chance, that is 3 to 4% of long-standing mixed tumor is nothing but pleomorphic adenoma. They will go into malignant mixed tumor, and they present as long-standing painless mass, which has recently enlarged, become painful because of involvement of facial nerve or ulcerated. They are poorly circumscribed and infiltrated. So it has poor prognosis. This mixed malignant tumor has poor prognosis. So lymphoma is also one of the types of malignancies of salivary gland. Most of them are non-Hodgkin's type, and they arises from B cell lineage. There is an increased risk in patients with Sjogren syndrome. So though they have shown to be mostly commonly due to infiltration of intraparotid nodes, parotid involvement is considered as extranodal spread for purpose of staging of the disease. So criteria for staging as primary parotid lymphoma includes parotid enlargement as first sign of disease, histological confirmation of parotid parenchymal involvement, and identification of malignant lymphoid infiltrate. So next is metastatic tumors. That means metastatic tumors means they generally affect the parotid gland. Metastasis to salivary gland occurs by three ways. One is direct by overlaying basal cells as squamous cell carcinoma. Second is lymphatic spread from any tumor in the drainage area of parotid nodes, mostly cutaneous head, mostly head and neck cancers. Hematogenous spread most commonly from melanoma, renal cell carcinoma, thyroid carcinoma, small cell carcinoma of lung, and breast carcinoma. So these are all metastatic spread to the salivary glands. So clinically, these tumors are hard in nature, whereas benign tumors are firm and soft in nature. Whereas these tumors are hard in nature and fixed to the skin, and they can be facial involvement, facial involvement, which can be which can be presented in the form of skin or mucosal numbness, persistent pain, large size of the lesion, and patient cannot drooling of the saliva from one side of the from the angle of the mouth. So these are all features of facial nerve damage. So facial nerve involvement never occurs in benign lesion, whatever the size. For submandibular tumors, lingual, hypoglossal, and cervical branch of facial nerve involvement should be ruled out. Any submucosal mass in the head and neck is considered a minor salivary gland tumor unless proved otherwise. So diagnosis, generally we diagnose it by using FNAC or biopsy. So FNAC is the investigation of choice, and incisional biopsy has no role. So excisional biopsy, that means we remove the tumor and send it to pathology. So it will tell you the diagnosis. Sometimes we can also use frozen section biopsy for determining the adequacy of margins of resection in malignant disease. So CT and MRI, the major role of CT and MRI is to know the lymph nodes. It's not useful for benign conditions. It's only used for malignant conditions. That is lymph node involvement. Whether the lymph nodes are involved, whether the distant metastasis, whether any bones or any lung, liver, if it is spread by blood spread. So the involvement of other organs and lymph nodes is determined by CT and MRI. So management, how do you manage? So any benign conditions, you have to manage it by superficial parotidectomy. That means we remove parotid gland up to superficial lobe. We don't touch the facial lobe, and also we don't touch the deep lobe. If the deep lobe involvement is present clinically or by any investigative methods, then you have to remove the deep lobe also. That is called total parotidectomy. Okay, total conservative parotidectomy, where we don't touch the facial lobe. Okay. So enucleation also carries a risk of injury to facial nerve. So we don't go for enucleation nowadays. We are not doing enucleation. We are removing entire parotid duct gland. That is superficial lobe. So that is superficial parotidectomy. So as I already told you, mentioned, if the deep lobe is involved, deep lobe is removed, sparing the facial nerve, then it's called total parotidectomy. If the facial nerve is also involved in case of any malignancy, then the whole gland is excised with the nerve. That is called, the term is called radical parotidectomy. So there are three types of parotidectomy. One is superficial, second is total, third is radical. So already told you, benign tumors are treated by superficial or total. Superficial, if the if the superficial lobe is involved. Total, if the deep lobe is also involved. So post-operative radiotherapy for any malignant changes. Because this malignant parotid tumor involves the lymph nodes also. So in that case, after removing the lymph nodes, there is a chance of recurrence. So to avoid recurrence, to prevent recurrence, or to reduce the risk of recurrence, we have to give radiotherapy. So if you give radiotherapy, there are some complications, but it will decrease the chance of recurrence of the disease. So you have to give radiotherapy. So how do you give radiotherapy? It's a very long, it's a big chapter. So generally, what we have in radiotherapy is we have two things. One is brachytherapy, and one more is teletherapy. Teletherapy means the radiation source is kept far away from the body, whereas brachytherapy is you have to keep the radiation source, that is radiation portals or whatever, it should be kept inside, very near to the body. That is, brachytherapy is inside the body or very near to the body, that is very near to the cancer cells, whereas teletherapy is the X-rays or gamma rays, whatever the rays they use, it should be sent from far away. That means the machine is somewhere far, and the machine send X-rays onto the body. That is teletherapy. Brachytherapy is we insert needles and some type of rods inside the tumor, and that needles consist of radiation material like cesium, cobalt. Okay, so that is a very different chapter. So complications of radiotherapy include xerostomia and estrogen tube dysfunction. So chemotherapy, it has little role except in unresectable tumors as adjuvant to radiotherapy. So what the chemotherapy drugs we use is cisplatin, cyclophosphamide, and adriamycin combination has proved efficacious. So it is in high-grade mucoepidermoid and squamous cell carcinomas, cisplatin and 5-fluorouracil are used. So prognosis of malignant salivary gland tumors, it varies with histology of the tumor and extent of disease. Recurrences with Warthin tumor and pleomorphic adenoma are rare after superficial parotidectomy. So if recurrences occur, that is called, already said, malignant mixed tumor that arises from pleomorphic adenoma. The prognosis for acinic cell and mucoepidermoid tumor is good with over 90% cure rates, whereas prognosis for lymphomas and other malignant tumors are less. So and the cure rates for those disorders are also very less. So complications of parotidectomy. After you remove parotid gland, what are the complications? Intraoperative, what are the preoperative, what are the intraoperative, what are the postoperative complications? So facial nerve damage obviously because you are the divider superficial and the deep lobe, so chances of damage to facial nerve will be there. Salivary fistula, it is also due to trauma to the main duct. Fistulation can occur. That means fistula to the outside or fistula to the inside of the oral cavity can occur. And there is also one more syndrome called Frey syndrome, very important. 2 marks question, Frey syndrome or gastritis sweating. And it is an unusual complication of parotid gland seen in 10 to 30% of patients. So what happens here is, in Frey syndrome, patient complains of sweating over the distribution of auricular temporal nerve during meals. So if the patient eats some food, he will be having sweating. Generally, we don't get sweating when we eat. Okay. So, but in this case, because of some damage to the auricular temporal nerve and some regeneration of the nerves, what happens is the patient on eating, he won't the saliva will be there definitely on eating. The salivary gland secretes saliva. So in addition to that, the patient also sweats in the distribution of auricular temporal nerve because of damage to the auricular temporal nerve. So it is caused by, as I already caused by injury to the auricular temporal nerve, which crossed regeneration, so that secretomotor stimulation meant for the parotid are directed to the sweat glands in the cutaneous distribution of auricular temporal nerve. So the patient will have sweating in the cheek region while eating. That is Frey's syndrome, very important syndrome. Gastritis sweating or Frey's syndrome. So thank you. And the treatment for Frey's syndrome is we can use any antiperspirants. That is, antiperspirant means nothing but some powder, zinc oxide or some powders which can decrease the sweating. And also we can go for neurectomies. We can remove this auricular temporal, repair the auricular temporal nerve. We can repair this crossed regeneration defect, so that sweating doesn't occur on eating. So Frey syndrome is very important. 2 marks question, generally regularly asked question. So any doubts? This is all about salivary gland tumors. Malik, are you there? Malik, Sai Malik.
Net on aitaledu, sir. Sir, I am there, sir.
Okay. Any doubts?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, then that's it for today. And thank you for listening to me. And salivary gland is very important topic. Just go through it in your books, SRB or Bailey and Love, whatever book you have. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.